Hey everybody, welcome back to Byte Club, the monthly indie game club podcast. I'm your host, Nevin.
And I'm your other host, Jesse.
And this month we are talking about Supergiant Games' first release title, Bastian. As a reminder, we will be discussing spoilers later on in this podcast. The first half is going to be completely spoiler-free, and we will let you know when we're heading into spoiler territory. So, a quick little intro for Bastion is that it is a top-down action game with a focus on tying story and gameplay together through narration. Released in 2011, this beat-em-up touches on themes of war, loss, regret, guilt, and how we deal with those as people. It's an interesting game despite its simple dressings of hacking and slashing, and I'm really excited to talk about it today.
Excited to talk about every game that we talk about on the Byte Club podcast. It's interesting that that's always the case. Usually. Always so far, I think, right?
Yeah, so far there has yet to be, honestly, initially I wasn't too stoked for this. And I want to talk about why.
Sure, go ahead, as long as it's not spoiler.
No, it's not spoilers. I talked to you about this a bit before, and a couple times like while I was playing through it.
But vaguely, I'm not entirely sure what your reasoning is for it. So yeah, go ahead.
I've always kind of had trouble placing how I feel about this game. I know that the first time I played it, I didn't like it. And when we decided to play it for this month, I kind of wanted to focus on trying to figure out why exactly I didn't like it.
Right.
And when I finished it, I came away from it like, well, I mean, I like this, but it's just, it doesn't live up to the hype, I think is what my thing is. But I was talking to Jam and reading some articles, and I remembered that when this game first came out, the people that I was hanging out with at the time were constantly talking about it. They were praising it as like the second coming or something like that. And when I played it, it didn't live up to that hype that they had set for it.
Okay.
And anytime that I tried to like talk to them about my issues with the game, to like actually discuss this game, I was kind of met with like brick walls and condescension. And that, I think, is what ended up pushing me so far away from Bastion, because I have this association with those people. And it was really only after playing it again, talking about it more, and kind of reading further into it, I feel like I have been able to kind of place how I feel about it. The game's not bad. I don't dislike it, but it's also not the savior that some people kind of make it out to be. It's solid. It's as good as the sum of its parts, but it's not greater than them. I feel like the biggest reason that people praise this game so much, apart from the things that it does really well, which we're going to talk about, but it kind of came out alongside other games like Braid, Amnesia, and Limbo, and kind of a handful-sized wave of indie games that were among the first to get people to realize that games with small budgets can do big things and can do interesting things. You don't need a multi-million-dollar budget and a team of 100,000 people or whatever to make a cool game. And it was kind of that first big wave that was super important and super defining, and it's kind of a part of indie game history at this point.
Oh yeah.
But it's not the best thing ever. It's just really good.
That's fair. I mean, so a lot of things aren't going to be the best thing ever, to be fair. Like, I think at the time when it came out, yeah, there was a lot of that perception, and I think you could see that even now with some games. I mean, look at Undertale, right? Like the way that you felt about Bastion in regards to how your friends reacted to it, or people around you reacted to it and treated it as possibly more than what you perceived it to be, and that might have ruined your perception of the game upon playing it. I think a lot of people had the same feeling with Undertale. They saw the reaction of fans, they saw the reactions of different communities, fan artists, all these people that were super, super interested in the game and really enjoyed it, but ultimately couldn't express that enjoyment in a way that was constructive, and ended up being destructive for a lot of people that might have actually enjoyed the game because they had expectations that were too high. And then when they weren't able to enjoy it to that same level as everyone else because of those expectations, they were berated for not feeling the same way. And yeah, I think that's just something that kind of pervades gaming culture in general. You can look at really any game that's been successful and has a sort of cult following for the same sort of reaction, or any really big game. I mean, Red Dead Redemption 2 was met with a lot of criticism, and you see that same sort of thing. Reviewers not giving games like that 90s or 100s met with the same sort of derision. So yeah, I think there is that element of being disappointed and being almost disregarded for your disappointment, when the disappointment is the result of the people that are disregarding you overselling what the product is. That's interesting that colored your perception of the game at the start.
It's also like it's something that Jam pointed out is like I have this habit of comparing my this is gonna be worded weird, but I compare my own perceived value or enjoyment of a thing to the stated enjoyment of a thing of other people.
Right.
And I have trouble. I get defensive when those things don't line up, because like I don't want to speak ill of something people enjoy, you know, and I don't want to be one of those guys who's like, oh no, it's just bad. I want to be able to explain why. And that's why this game was causing me a lot of issues, because I had this bad taste in my mouth about this game, but it wasn't anything with the game that did that, really. And I think that I just think that that's interesting. And like everything that we've read and talked about, like everything that all the articles that you found and the videos and stuff, this game kicks a lot of ass.
Yeah, it's a great game. Like it's kind of hard to deny that fact, I think, in a lot of cases. Yeah. So something interesting that you said at the start, in regards to that list of games, a sort of handful of games that people were looking at as the original bests, I suppose, of the indie space. That like mid 2000s, late 2000s sort of renaissance of indie gaming, where everyone started to realize, that indie games can be more than that. And, you know, if you look outside of the big names, if you find yourself being bored by games, you can look at those newer, smaller experiences and find something that might appeal to you that you may not have already been aware of. And I think a lot of that has to do with the Humble Bundle, right? I mean, you can look at
Humble did
the way that game. Yeah, I mean, you know, they were the frontier of indie gaming for a long while. That sort of also cascaded into the bundle crisis and the race to zero and all that sort of stuff going on in the indie game market right now. That's not
the
as
race
big of a
to
problem.
zero.
Yeah, like, you know, that concept that developers are, well, not developers necessarily, but anyone in a sales position is trying to sell products and undercut their competition, right? So games were just put in bundles that were really, really cheap. Like there are some sites that sell bundles of like 10 games for $3, which is insane. And they really devalue the cost of indie games. So there was this brief period where everyone was selling games for way too low. Steam had deals that were way too low. We've seen that sort of snap back. You know, we've got this sort of adjustment in the industry. You can see a lot of games starting to go back up in price, leveling out at around $20 for indie games on average. Some a little lower, some a little higher. Obviously, there's $40 indie games like Ashen that we played, stuff like that. But, you know, we've seen that sort of fix itself. But that was that point in time where those games sort of caused that thing. Their success ultimately was at the hands of people being able to get access to indie games for so cheap. And games like Amnesia and like Limbo and like Bastion in some cases were so cheap and were on sale so often that other indie games coming into the space that were benefiting from their success did have to sort of undercut them, did have to go to those price points that may not have been sustainable for games that were less successful. So that is really interesting that like you just brought those up and made me think about that aspect of Bastion's success, it being so popular and being one of the first games to really be successful at a time where indie games had to be cheaper to be successful is really interesting after their release, obviously. But that is really interesting to think about, I think, in regards to that game.
I think this might be a bit of a tangent, but I think there's probably a pretty fair room for concern about that sort of things being too low priced happening again.
Yeah.
With this most recent Epic sale.
Definitely, yeah.
That came out, and I don't want to get too into that because that's not what we're here to talk about. But I feel like that's probably going to happen again soon, because like things get cheap and people then continue to expect them for cheap, and it's damaging.
Yeah, I mean, you see the reaction of developers on there. Like you said, I don't want to get too much into it either, but you see the reaction to developers who had games on there for a while. Gearbox with Borderlands 3. I forget who the other one was, but there was another larger Paradox with Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. Like that had to come down.
Mm-hmm.
All those games had to come down off of the store because they just didn't want their games to be advertised at that price. And you can see now, if you check the Epic Store, originally when the sale started, the prices were just advertised as $10 cheaper regardless. But now if you see the games, they look like they're $22.49 or whatever, or like $50 or $80 or $60.
It gives you the option to buy it at that
and then when you
price.
click onto the actual game, you see the discounted price. So I think that's a better way of advertising that they're cheaper. If you just see the game or are interested in it, click on it, you know what the price of it is regularly, and then you see the sale price. It's probably a better move. But yeah, that is a good point, that as we see these sort of warring, I don't know what the word is for it, but bigger storefronts, I guess, because I mean GOG and you know itch.io, they've existed forever and haven't really been able to take a piece out of the pie from Steam.
They're kind of doing their own thing though.
They are. They know what they're doing. They're on a totally different totem pole compared to Steam and Epic. But it's nice that there's someone else on the totem pole with Steam. I just wish they were less awful about it. Anyways, speaking about the Epic Store, I recently picked up Hades from Supergiant Games and playing that recently, I've started to think a lot about the gameplay of Bastion and my feelings about it. So as someone that didn't like the game all that much, Nevin, at the start, and you found that you've humbled up to it a little more. You've been able to understand what you like about it and what you don't like about it. And I'm curious what you think about the combat and gameplay elements that are within Supergiant's first game, Bastion.
A lot of I wanted to talk about this too, and I think my thing is that like the combat is kind of just standard. Like there's nothing extremely special about this combat. There's a really good variety of weapons. I love that you can mix and match them pretty much however you want, like any two things. But it plays like a top-down beat 'em up. It plays like Streets of Rage from a bird's eye view.
Right.
I think it's not you don't play this game for the combat is kind of what I come away from it. It's enjoyable. It's enough to frame the story and to give you like things to do on the way to the end of the story, but I don't feel like there's anything special about this combat. It's good. It's good enough, but nothing feels especially interesting. There isn't really a whole lot of tactical decision. Like you've got the spirits and the shrines that you can do with, but that's not the gameplay. Those are modifiers, and right. I love them. I think the shrine was really cool. It came up with a couple really interesting challenges, and actually using the shrines made the game hard enough for the gameplay to be interesting. This is a pretty easy game with the exception of like a couple areas and a couple optional things.
Yeah.
And the tonics, I think, are like the spirits, I think, are really cool. That's an interesting way to handle an RPG system. That's a really cool way to build your own class. Same thing for the upgrade trees. But the combat itself is kind of just there.
Yeah, it is pretty cut and dry. I do definitely agree with that. Like a lot of people at the start of the game's promotional tour, I guess, it was being compared to Diablo a lot, like a very bright, colorful, and fun Diablo with less sort of loot mechanics and more narrative stuff. And I think that's a pretty accurate comparison. It makes the most sense to me in terms of like the way that you fight. The dodge rolling mechanic is good. It works. There are elements of it, like certain enemies that you fight, that are good. But I think it also sort of suffers from the aging problem. I think Bastion, while still being, or not necessarily the aging problem, I guess more the Seinfeld effect. I guess, is that a thing? Like so
Seinfeld
many people have,
effect?
yeah. So many people have done the thing that Bastion did in terms of like the simple sort of rolling combat sort of thing. I mean, people were doing it before that with Diablo, like I said, Diablo clones, stuff like that. Titan Quest and all that. Those sorts of games. We're doing similar things, but I think over time we saw a bunch of games with similar-ish fighting or combat systems within their games, rolling into combat, having two weapons, stuff like that. And I wonder if that has sort of affected our ability to look back on the combat from Bastion as something uniquely interesting. Because you can look back at Braid, right? Braid, no one's really done that in as well of a way or as interesting of a way, in my opinion. Like there's Super Time Force Ultra, but like that's just so ridiculous. Yeah, it's like not even on the same level of complexity, in my opinion. Despite being more visually complex, it just doesn't do as much with the time reversal, which is fine. I'm not saying it has to. But what I am saying is that Bastion, compared to Braid, compared to even Amnesia, which they couldn't even emulate that same sort of thing, those are games that I think you could play again now and still be surprised, still be shocked, still find yourself doing things that no other game has done in the last 10, 12 years, right? And I think Bastion doesn't have that same level of uniqueness in its gameplay.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think it's also interesting that Bastion wasn't necessarily like as defining as Amnesia and Limbo, for example. Like Limbo and Amnesia came out, and then we saw a shitload of atmospheric platformers and games where you run away and hide from monsters. But after Bastion, we didn't really see like a big increase in beat 'em ups,
Yeah, that is a good point. I guess like that sort of has to do with the older games that Bastion's sort of emulating as well, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, like Diablo and stuff, they were... Obviously, this isn't a Diablo clone, but that sort of isometric mix of melee and ranged combat system, that sort of hack and slashy kind of gameplay, it wasn't unique when Bastion did it in the first place. So it's not going to be unique 10 years later. We've played games like that, you know, The Adventure of Van Helsing, Titan Quest's new expansions and stuff like that, Torchlight 1 and 2.
Torchlight,
like
yeah.
those are games that you can kind of, they don't, you know, they're not unique either. And I think Bastion gameplay wise kind of has that same formula. And so because of that, we don't look back on it in the same sort of way. I think if I played this again at the age of whatever when it came out, how old is this game? Like 12 years?
It came out in 2011.
20, wow, it's only 8 years.
Only
Goodness
8
gracious,
years.
feels like forever ago. Well, if I played it again when I was 16, whatever, really?
A child.
Whatever. Yeah, a lifetime ago. That's not true. I'm a baby. Yeah, if I played that again at that age where I hadn't really played as many games as I have in that time, obviously because of time, but also just like the range of games. I mean, when I was 16, you know, like everyone was playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 pretty much every day for like 3 or 4 hours after school. Like that's just what we did.
And that's another thing.
Yeah, it's just the breadth of games, right? When you've played so much,
like
this sort of thing doesn't become as interesting.
Like the main thing I was playing at that time was probably Halo. Like Halo 2 or 3. And then
like everyone had their party shooter.
Exactly. Everybody had the game that it's like, okay, I'm going to come home and play this game. Shit, I think I was playing Spiral Knights, actually. Wow.
You were already on that indie game train.
Well, that entire group was playing Spiral Knights, and that was like the people that I played games with, so I played Spiral Knights.
That's so weird. I never really got into that.
Yeah.
that does make sense. I don't want to get into Spiral Knights.
Spiral Knights
a little bit of it.
We should do a Byte Club Spiral Knights.
Oh boy. Maybe in 20 years.
Maybe in 20 years. Yeah. So it's interesting because like that's definitely true that the selection of games was still very small. Like people were mainly playing like League of Legends, Dota, like the big games. The big games are what we were playing. Like Team Fortress 2 is definitely one of them, and then like it was a lot of party shooters, simple games that you come home and you play, and then this game comes out of nowhere and is like, hey, guess what? We got action and a story, buddy. Come and get it.
You ever play BioShock? No? All right, cool. Complete this.
Shit,
we will also
it's a little BioShock.
Yeah, we'll make philosophical debates within our game.
I like the number of readings. Like it's a surprising number of readings that this game has. We'll talk about that more in the spoiler section.
Yeah.
Man, there's a lot about this game. There's a lot. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about before going into spoilerinos?
Wow, you just want to go right in there.
I do, honestly. Like that's where the meat of this game is for me.
That's fair. I think something that I wanted to discuss with Bastion that's not necessarily spoilery, I don't think, is just like the art.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, like for the time, you know, there were other painterly games like Braid, you know, biggest one jumps to mind. But I feel like they just really nailed an art style here, and you can see it going through to the rest of Supergiant's catalog. And same with their music as well. Like the respect that they have for the aesthetic of their games, the respect that they have for the mood and the tone and the environment that they're trying to create when you play a Supergiant game, I think is what makes it so appealing, and why I think so many people at the start, especially your friends who may have overhyped it, were so into the game. Because at that time, you know, games were coming out in the AAA space and everything was gray or brown or like low texture but high effect, like very not interesting to look at. Every city was New York, every battlefield was Afghanistan, everything looked the same. And then you get this game that like doesn't look like anything you've played before. It doesn't look like, you know, any of those big games people are playing. It doesn't have the grays, it doesn't have the weird 3D, you know, kind of ugly looking things. I mean, yeah, some of the characters in the game are 3D, but they're not like high poly, but bordering on Uncanny Valley. Like, you know, we still kind of were seeing boring games, and this one came out and just blew everyone away with its ability to tell a story, with its music, with its looks. I think that aesthetical simplicity, but also like trust in their ability to represent what they want to represent properly, speaks to Supergiant as a company. You can see it, you know, throughout Transistor, throughout Pyre, and now throughout Hades, that just like they know what they're doing when they're trying to create a style. And it's not different with every game, but it is different enough that it feels like you are experiencing something new every time. I just love how good they are at that.
So it's actually probably really worth talking about, because like a lot of the stuff that we kind of read, like a lot of these articles and videos that we found were discussing the music and the presentation of these games. And it's really cool because Darren Korb, the composer of the soundtrack for Bastian, Transistor, all their shit, was brought in he was in on the ground floor of Bastion. And there's actually a song in the first ever like shown prototype build that is still in the final game in the exact same form.
Yeah.
Like their commitment to tone, their commitment to music being a basis for the presentation kind of is a Supergiant calling card. Like you can always guarantee that their music is going to be good, fit the setting, have a unique style, and make you feel something. And that is the music is absolutely my biggest praise point for Bastion. Like there's no arguing.
Yeah, I mean Supergiant's music has just been absolutely lovely from start to finish. I mean every single game that they've come out with and whatever they come out with next is just going to be a hallmark for music and games. I mean, you could look at the music from Bastion or the music from Transistor or the music from Pyre or now Hades. Like I said, like these games, every single one of them just has some of the most relaxing and also some of the most like powerful tracks in the industry.
Powerful is a very good word.
Yeah.
Because they put a lot of thought into how they use their music. Like there's talks about how they use music in certain levels. And we'll talk about that more in spoilers because there's three instances that are 4 instances. You get what I'm saying? Like they're really good with it. I just love that. Everybody should go and listen to the Bastion soundtrack just because it's fucking amazing.
Yeah, and then when you're done, listen to the Transistor soundtrack, and then listen to the Pyre soundtrack, the acoustic versions. They have a whole acoustic album. And when you're listening to Transistor, keep in mind that there's like layers to the music, and each of the layers can be disabled or enabled within the game. It's insane.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
Yeah. Just seeing how Korb has evolved as a sound designer within the games industry, as someone who really was just a musician, like not a standard. I don't want to underplay his abilities, but he played music. He played music for bands and he made songs, and that was it. He wasn't like a composer. He didn't know any of the technical stuff behind game design or sound design, or even like how to do narration in some sort of special way to make it work better in games. He just did what worked in his head and made things happen. Yeah. And that's so cool that he did so well with Bastion and kept getting better over time.
There's a really good, he did a GDC talk.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's really good. He goes into a lot of detail about his process and like his limitations, and I think that his limitations and how he worked within them is extremely clever and like very indicative of how good he is at making music. All around, just super damn good.
Supergiant good.
Supergiant good. Seal of approval. You know what? There's actually also just a fun little fact. Bastion was like its original concept being about like planting stuff. I thought was really funny.
Yeah, well, that wasn't like the original concept so much as it was
one of them.
That was what you did at the Bastion. So like you would plant some of the items that you found throughout the world to make trees that grew the thing. Like it wasn't, no combat. You're just planting things. It's Stardew Valley, but in 2010 or 11. Like, there was still most of the regular mechanics, but the Bastion wasn't so much building things that let you level up your items or get better items or new items. It was more, you grow the items with things that you find within the world, which would have been interesting, I think, to implement still if they found a way to do it properly. But
I think they did.
What do you mean?
The cores and all that stuff that you bring back?
Well, yeah, I mean, that creates stores, and then you use the stores to purchase things. But I mean, if they kept that growth element, that like growing things element, that would have built to what the Bastion was going for.
Okay.
But, I think they still did they found a fine solution to the problem with what they were doing in the end. It works. I don't think it's bad or anything.
It's very good. Cool. Great. Good.
Yeah.
I love this. Man, the more I talk about this game, the more I like it.
Yeah, see, there you go. I think it's a great game.
There we go.
I think
I do think it's a great game.
It is a cornerstone of the indie space. Like you said, it defined kind of the new generation of indie games within the space, and a lot of the games that we can look back on fondly over the last 10 years, or I guess 8 years. I can't believe it's only been that long. We can attribute their success to those original original handful of games. All these people that were inspired by those, that were inspired by the games that came after them, and so on and so forth, and will continue to be inspired by those games. We can always kind of look back to that year as the time when people started to respect indie games in a serious way. So yeah, I mean, Celeste was up for a game award against, God of War and Red Dead Redemption 2. Like, indie games,
it's so crazy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, take them seriously. And I think it's taken this long to get to that point, but it's only going to take, a couple more years, I think, before half of the Game of the Year awards at that kind of show are taken up by indie games. Are taken up by AA once that makes its comeback. And I'm excited to see what that means for the future of the industry as AAA pushes further and further to the end of the capitalist games development system. And indie kind of moves into the space that they were occupying maybe 20, 30 years ago. I'm excited for that.
It's especially crazy with how many games release, every day. Like, there was a statistic. It just, the number that releases every day is ridiculous, just on Steam alone, not even counting itch.io, which the numbers are probably way higher there.
Oh yeah,
it's cool. I love a lot about what this game allowed a lot of stuff to happen, like you said. Like, it was fuel for the fire. And it led to a game called Pyre. Okay, I did a rhyme. Oh, I did it.
Rapper.
Okay. I did it. I am not a rapper. Anything else?
No, I mean, I think that's it. That we can't spoil anyways.
Okay. Well, we do have one spoiler-free question from Jacob Geller, and that is: has any other game done narration this effectively?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. There's a small handful of games that are probably inspired by Bastion to some extent, right? I mean, what is it? The Stanley Parable, big one. That sort of narrative reactive thing. It's exactly the same thing too, right? Of the narrator sort of reacting to what the player is doing.
Beginner's Guide.
Yeah, Beginner's Guide as well, being very driven by it. Dear Esther to an extent, although I think that doesn't reach the same level of Bastion in terms of reacting to the player.
Dear Esther doesn't really react to the player.
It doesn't. It tells the story it tells, but obviously the path you go on, it does sort of tell you different stories, but it doesn't seem to care what the player's input is on the game. Exactly. It's less narrating and more just telling the story, which is fine. I think Dear Esther's great, but
Wolfenstein, the new Wolfenstein.
Yeah, Wolfenstein, the New Order, thing. The Old Blood, and 2, but it's not as reactive. Again, it's the same sort of thing.
Exactly.
Where it tells a great story, but it's not, reacting to the player. And I think Bastion, Beginner's Guide, or sorry, not Beginner's Guide, Stanley Parable. But is there anything else like that you can think of that sort of has that narration that depends on the player's input within the game?
No, I think it's all that really comes to mind is those two. There's probably some other games that I'm just not thinking of, but those are the big players. Would be Bastion and the Beginner or Stanley Parable.
Yeah, which are great games. I mean, Stanley Parable is great. Fantastic. Beginner's Guide is also very, very good.
Very good.
But, again, not the same sort of thing. But, if you haven't played Stanley Parable and you enjoyed Bastion's narrative and storytelling, check out the Stanley Parable. It is bonkers. You
should play the Stanley Parable regardless.
You should just play anything.
Play game. Play video game.
Who gave us that question again?
That was Jacob Geller.
Jacob, thank you very much for the question. Great question.
Yes. So we're going to head on into spoilers. But before we do that, we'll take a little break and we'll be back here.
Yes, we will.
To talk about spoilerinos.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Jesse.
What's up?
Remember how last episode we asked people to give us their names?
Oh yeah,
just money to read their names.
I remember that.
We got names. We got names.
Ooh.
We got David Snotter,
Mark
B. Writing, Puking Goombas, Steve Z, and Storm Hughes. We got 5 freaking names.
Well, that's 4 more names than last time.
That is 4 more names than last time. It's some good names.
That's awesome.
Thank you for giving us money and also your names. Thanks for supporting us on Patreon. If you want your name read here, if you want to help us grow our definitely not Eldritch Horror power source, then head on over to patreon.com/IndieBytesYT to see how you can give us your name forever.
You'll never get it back.
Never. It's ours now. Okay, so we're in Spoiler Town. Talking about spoilers.
Talking about spoilers. Not on cars.
Spoilers. All right. What was your favorite moment in Bastion?
When it was over, dude, and the credits hit.
Oh,
that was the best.
Oh, shit.
I mean,
Got him.
everyone goes to the Bastion. Everyone goes to Zulf, I think, when you save Zulf, or don't save Zulf if you're a monster. As really the hitting point in the game.
If you didn't save Zulf, you're not my friend.
If you play the game one time and then didn't play it again to see what happens if you save Zulf, go do that. It's
Saving
monumentally
so
better.
Good. It is very, very good.
Man, what is my favorite? I guess that. Yeah, I was trying to think of like a smart person thing to say, but no, that's really the best moment of the game. IMO.
I like when you first meet Zia.
Yeah,
it is extremely good. There is, especially after seeing Corb's talk where he discusses like what went into planning that level.
Yeah, doing Prosper Bluff and how they sort of set it up with the music and everything. Yes. And then when you hit the end and the way the vocals come in. Yeah.
It is very, very good. Plus that song is just so good.
Yeah, that's a great song.
It's a fantastic song. I was actually kind of curious to see between Build That Wall and Coming Home, which of the two songs was more popular. Mm-hmm. Just based off of a quick YouTube view count thing, which one do you think was more popular?
It's tough. Probably Build That Wall.
By a very small margin, it was Build That Wall. But unsurprisingly, the credits song, which is both of those songs, the two, was infinitely more popular.
Yeah,
like
and that makes sense.
It had like 1 million more views.
I mean, duet songs like that are always good covers as well. So I think that probably plays into it.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, just another example of the music being fantastic. And that song, especially when you listen to the lyrics and you realize that it's a war song from the era. It's
Build That
really
Wall
good.
or Coming Home?
Build That Wall is a war song.
Is it a war song? I thought it was a song like about the builders more than it was the walls.
No, so Zia's in Ura.
Yeah. Thank you.
And yes. So the song lyrics are basically, go ahead and build that wall. You build that wall, we'll dig our holes, and that wall's gonna come falling down.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a war song. It's all about like how the Ceylondians have been colonizers, and the Ura are tired of it. Which I guess that kind of brings me into my next point. This game was surprisingly political.
It was surprisingly anti-colonialist, but also not
for the time.
Well, yeah, but also not at the same time. And this is something I really wanted to get into. If you don't mind me barreling down this gun. So
let's do it.
I really, really like Bastion. I really like the story it tells and the way it tells its story. I think like in a lot of ways has more to say about the things it's saying than even games that are coming out today that masquerade as being apolitical, or even try to pretend that they get the politics. There aren't a lot of games that talk about colonialism in any meaningful way. More often than not, colonialism is kind of something you have to accept as a person playing games. If you aren't willing to engage with that political system or that just system in general, then you're not going to be able to play a lot of games that are popular. You have to find ways to play those games that make it less like that. So I think it's good that Bastion so early on in the indie space was approaching a topic that is so hard to approach properly within games. At the same time, though, I think that Bastion sort of sacrifices its ability to tell that story in a meaningful way when mechanically it just has a different message. Like, so at a point in the game, Rux is telling you that you need to collect the shards, no matter what, and the cores and all that. And especially, I think when you're going into the wilderness and you have to sort of like break up the brush and you have to kill the animals and stuff, and like it's something you have to do to get the shard to build the bastion, and it's okay because you're going to undo everything. But like, at what point do you sort of accept that, especially with the ending of the game, at what point do you accept that what you're doing is okay so long as you are doing what you think is right? And it, it speaks to that degree of manifest destiny of, the the powerful can do what they want so long as they're doing it for the right reasons. But like, who defines the right reasons? The powerful. So, you know, they always end up tricking everyone into thinking what they're doing is right. And that's kind of the message of the game, I think, in the end. But gameplay wise, you're never really taught that what you're doing within the game is the wrong thing to do. Like, you do it because it's the right thing to do. And it offers you time trials, and it offers you, you know, bonus points and XP and all this stuff. The more you go against the theme of the game, the more you benefit. So at a point, it does indirectly criticize colonialism, but it also shows you the benefits, the tangible benefits of the colonizer on the colonized, or by colonizing somebody else, rather. And that is like, again, that's just kind of inherent to games. Like, you can't, I'm not saying inherent necessarily that you can't make a game where that's not the case, but that typical gameplay scheme, that hack and slash, right? The loot and shoot, whatever you want to call it, those gameplay mechanics always end up leading back to that point of you being a powerful individual that takes something from someone else who is less powerful than you. I mean, we have an entire genre of games like that, right? I mean, the battle royales, you find someone more powerful or less powerful, you take what they have because you need it, and you're going to do the right thing. You're going to win in the end, and it doesn't matter how you get there as long as you do. And that, you know, it's hard to break out of that. That's a really
interesting point. Yeah.
It's just, it got me thinking about that a lot by the end.
I can tell. I can tell. I think that that's also kind of part of the point. Like, that's kind of the whole, that's the crux of the situation, right? You're doing these horrible things, and Rux is trying to justify it. And it kind of, it makes me think about Spec Ops: The Line. You know, it's kind of doing that same thing, where it's like, the game is forcing you to be this violent man. The game is forcing you to do this violence. And then it turns around and it says, oh, but you didn't have to. You could have put the game down.
Yeah, so I think like the Spec Ops comparison, Spec Ops has that moment where it does turn you around and say what you're doing is wrong. Like, it has that second where it says to you, like, you doing all these violent things is wrong. Like, you didn't have to do these things. But Bastion, I don't think ever really has that moment. I don't think it actually sits you down and ever really says to you that what you're doing is wrong. Rux just tells you why they're doing it and tells you why the Ura is doing what they're doing. And the end of the game asks you a fundamental question where you get to decide whether or not what you're doing is necessarily wrong. I think, anyways. Like,
I don't think that that's what that question at the end of the game was about.
Well, yeah, okay. So there's ways to look at the ending that are different. Right. There's a way to look at it as, which are you willing to do, or which is worse, I guess, in the end. Is it worse to let the sins of the past lie and do nothing to undo it if you can? Or is it like worse to go back and risk possibly doing it again? And that's sort of the thing you have to weigh of, are you willing to repeat something or possibly repeat something for the chance of it maybe not happening, the coin flip there. But I think when I see that ending, what I hear is the question of, like, are you okay with colonization repeating itself, or do you want to move forward and sort of have to, almost to an extent, have to still colonize? When you're moving forward and finding a new space, like, you know, it's only 4 people, but you do kind of have to go forward, and this kid is like this mass murderer. Like, he's going around destroying.
He is not. Do you think the kid is a good guy?
I mean, again, that's the question that the game is asking you to consider.
Yeah.
Is like, not even the kid. I mean, there's a reason it's a kid. It could have just been an adult with a name, but it's not. It's the kid. It's somebody who has no
kid. Yeah.
It's someone who has no no prior perception of the world. Children don't know what's going on. I mean, he built the wall. He knows what's happening.
He does.
Yeah, he knows what's happening. He built the wall. He lived in Ceylondia. He understands all that. But there's elements of this story that Rux knows that he doesn't.
Rux is definitely, like, I feel, looking at it through this lens, and honestly through any lens, really, I feel like Rux is probably manipulating the kid a little bit, telling him, because like a lot of the narration is, this is what we do, this is the plan, this is what you need to do, there are no other options, you need to go and get this. The Ura, we fought with them, but they're okay in the city now, I guess. You know, this guy served in the Mancers or whatever, I was in the Mancers, blah blah blah. But as you progress, his narration and like even some of the side stuff that you can do, like you can learn about Zia's past and learn how the Ceylondians were like super fucking racist. and all of this stuff, and it definitely, the Ceylondians were not the good guys here, and that I don't think like is any point of questioning like the way the game presents it. I don't think you can argue that Ceylondians on the whole were the good guys here,
and that I think speaks to our political bias. And I think that's important to consider when saying something like that, because the game gives you a choice in the end. The game asks you, what do you think? The game says, do you save do you save Zolf or do you leave him behind? Like, is it worth saving someone who did something wrong, who's part of a tribe that is willing to kill you guys and not allow you to fix the past, worth saving? Is it, is that tribe worth saving? Is the leader of that tribe or a member of that tribe that you're aware of worth saving? And there's a moral aspect to it, but I think the game, like, it's easy for us to hear that colonialist message. It's easier for us to hear that stuff and be like, they're the bad guys. There's no disputing it. But there are people that will hear that and not even think about it. Because, I mean, when I played the game when I was younger,
True.
I don't remember what I picked, but I know I didn't care about it this much. I know I didn't hear that stuff the way I hear it now. I heard it in a sort of blanket, like, us versus them, who is right, who is wrong sort of way. And now that I have a more, leftist political leaning, I can hear that stuff and hear the colonialist messaging. I can hear, how we're supposed to not like that stuff. We hear Rux as sort of not a, maybe kissing the ring, a little less than licking the boot. He was a marshal, so definitely a little bootlicking.
He wasn't a marshal, he was a mancer. He was a member of the scientific, like, weapons development division.
Sorry, but he accepted the marshals, I guess, is more what I'm getting at.
He did. He accepted, like, the role that he and Ceylondia, like, kind of had.
Yeah. He does have a regret,
it sounds like,
as things go along. But he does still accept that is the way to fix things. Like, he doesn't even really buy the not going back in time thing from the ending.
Here's a question for pour vous, Senor. Do you think that Bastion and its discussions and messages have become more powerful over time, with sort of, like you were talking about, the political side of things, with that take? Do you feel like this game has more to say now, given the way things are in the world, than it did when it first came out?
I mean, I think it's relevant all the time. It was relevant before it came out. Its messages 10, 20, 30, 100 years now even. I think it's just something that has happened for so long, and continues to happen and probably will continue to happen for far too long. So is it relevant? More relevant? I don't know. I think it's about as relevant as when it came out, probably for different reasons, to a different extent, but it has the same message, and depending on your political views, it will say the same thing to you, I think.
Fair.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think it's more?
I think that for me, it's probably a little bit more, because, like, I didn't give a shit about politics. Or anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, to that extent, I agree.
For me personally, it's, like, way more powerful.
Yeah.
Like, I have a much harder stance on the things that this game is talking about,
of course,
than when it came out. But I definitely agree with you that, like, with regards to the bigger picture, the world as a whole, and history and all that stuff, it's saying the same things. It feels a little more applicable today because of where we are, but same shit, different day, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Really. It's heavy.
Shit. Heavy shit.
I wanna talk about another reading of the game, actually.
Sure.
Errant Signal's reading of the game is about it being about a breakup, like a metaphor for a breakup. And I think that that's an interesting take on it. Like, the fact that take exists is very cool to me, because you can look at it and there's definitely, like, the stages of grief, I guess. Mm-hmm. That you kind of go through after a breakup. Like, there's a lot of bargaining with, like, oh, well, if my whole world has fallen apart, what can I do to put it back together? And, like, you go and you gather these crystals, these MacGuffins to build yourself back up. Like, if the kid represents, like, a part of you, and the Bastion represents the whole of you, and you're putting it back together. And then at the end of the game, you have this option of getting back with, like, setting the world back how it was, getting back with that person at the risk of that same disaster or that same heartbreak like happening again, or choosing to move on. And I think that that's a really interesting take. What do you think?
I mean, from a metaphorical standpoint, yeah, I get it.
Purely metaphorical.
Sure, yeah. I mean, in Errant Signals video, there's a lot of reading stuff that's there within the game that I think, while it's there, it doesn't necessarily prop up that as the intended reading of the game. I think it's just there, and it's an element of the story. I mean, there was a cataclysm that killed everything in Caelondia, almost everything in Caelondia.
Yes, almost everything.
Like, you know, I'm sure someone's love died. Probably Rux cared about somebody who died. Like that's kind of my problem with that read as the intended read of the game, or even as one that is wholly the point. Like, it's not a smaller part of the story, it's the story.
Oh yeah, I
think
that
as a
that
read
this
is ridiculous.
I don't think, I'm not trying to say that.
No, I know
this is
you're
a
not,
good
but
read
the
of
way that I got it from Chris's video, it's an old video, so I don't blame him. But yeah, that sort of thing made me think that that's what he was getting across. And I just don't.
Okay.
I don't buy that. But as a metaphorical stance, I think, yeah. I mean, you could look at Bastion as a metaphor for really anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be a breakup. It could be trauma,
the loss
right?
of a loved one. It can
Yeah.
be any kind of trauma.
Well, yeah, that sort of grief. I think it's easier to do it as a sort of, yeah,
grief.
Yeah, well, anything that like you can undo easily. I think the time thing is sort of like a weird situation, like a cyclical, because it is cyclical, right? Like, how do you? I mean, the last choice, again, maybe it's our political leaning, maybe it's the way that I view things, but I feel like the idea of going back and doing the same thing over and over again, or possibly doing the same thing over and over again, just doesn't make any sense. So I don't like that time reversal thing so much as I like the returning part of that relationship metaphor that you have of like going back to someone, not like undoing things and going back and doing it over again. Like, that's nonsense. But yeah, I think
you definitely, you can't. Yeah.
I know you can't real life go back in time. but just like, I feel like the metaphors are easier to connect if you ignore that time reversal part of it. And in that respect, I think like it's harder to do loss of a loved one. That's the point I'm getting at. Like, loss of a loved one, I can't do as well as I can do like the breakup or the grief or like the trauma, you know, just like someone going through traumatic experience, and sort of wanting, like, you are better now. Do you think you could go back to that person and make it work, or should you move on and do something else? And that's sort of always what it comes back to, of like, you know, any situation, a job, right? Like, you leave a job where you're unhappy, and, you know, things don't work out. There's that cataclysm, the fallout. You lose your friends, you lose everything. You don't have a job anymore. You know, you're poor, but you fix things. You have a support system, and you think, like, can I go back to that job, or should I find something else? And that, you know, that same sort of thing always sort of wraps around. There's always that loss, and that, do you want to return, or do you want to move on? And that is you know, if you break it down, that's what Bastion's about, and you could apply that to anything. And that is really interesting. That's what the game ends up boiling down to.
For sure. Did you have any questions?
Did I have any
I feel
questions?
like I didn't have any questions. Was there anything specific that you wanted to touch on with this?
I do, but I also feel like we have a lot of questions for the spoiler section. So I will leave a lot of that to that, honestly. We'll probably cover most of what I want to talk about anyways.
Okay. Then if we have anything else we want to talk about after these questions, then we'll hop on that. So let's we've got our first question here from Hot Cider on Twitter. If you could bring over one element of Bastion's design into other games to elevate them, what would it be? It's probably the music for me. Like, the importance of the music in Bastion cannot be overstated, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. It's really, really good. And their approach to making sure that it's a part of the game and less supplementary is really, really impressive. I don't think there's a lot of developers that even hit the same strides. Like, the only one I can think of recently is that Grease game, or Grease, however you say. I don't know. I'll be whatever
Grease.
language. Great game. Does a lot with its music. In the same sort of way of like the player, like, it reminds me a lot of Transistor, in that the player character sings, not in the game, but, you know, their thing is that they sing, and that's sort of something you get along the way as the game goes on. So that is the only thing I can think of recently that does something similar. So yeah, that's probably something I'd like to see in a lot of games that aren't made by Supergiant.
Just more care put towards the use of music and the actual composition.
Mm-hmm. I think for myself, probably the shrine mechanic. I feel like, yeah, I mean, we've had so many problems with difficulty in the last couple years, people talking about that I think starting from a base that's more accessible and having incremental steps of difficulty that not only are enemies hit more or have more health or whatever the case may be, that are things like when they die, they drop explosives. They can reflect attacks, just like random effects like that. I think those add a certain level of difficulty that is more enjoyable for players, that once they get better, that once they learn the mechanics better, once they understand how to play the game better, they can make those decisions on their own and they can fine tune them. And players that don't want to interact with that mechanic, that don't want that, they can ignore it. And that's great. I think that's good. I think that's something that more games could use and benefit from. For sure.
For sure. I really like the idea of being able to fine tune your difficulty. And that's definitely something that, like, the first time that I played Bastion, I didn't use the shrines, like, at all. I was just trying to get through it, and funnily enough, at the time, I didn't like difficult games, and my tastes have changed wildly since then, and I was turning on pretty much every single shrine as I got it. By the end, I think I was playing with 4 or 5 shrines active at any given moment, and it was way harder, but it was way more enjoyable, and I think that, like, your point is absolutely correct. Like, if we can start at an air quotes easier or, you know, non air quotes more accessible baseline, then I think and just let people fine tune their stuff, I think that we'd get a much wider range of interesting mechanics too.
Definitely.
And interesting combinations, because there's shit that you don't need to have on, and you can find just interesting combinations that make the game a specific kind of difficult.
Yeah.
I think that's yeah, I'd like to see more things do something like that too. It's also interesting that it's like a diegetic thing. Like it's within the game world. You are praying to these gods to wreck your shit.
And they're able to balance that in their future games as well. I don't know if I don't think Pyre has something like that, but it's more narratively driven anyways. But Transistor has something like that, and Hades does
Pyre
as well.
has a thing kind of like that. Like you level up characters, and then you get rid of characters.
Yeah. But that's less like, you know, adjusting the difficulty, because there's, you know, it's more narratively focused. It's more like a sports game than it is like an action or fighting game like the other ones are.
True. Man, Pyre's so good.
It is
Go
great.
play Pyre. Fuck. Our next question is a big one, and it's actually like 3 questions. So Chariot Rider sends us this paragraph. So, of the 3 big Supergiant games, I played Bastion last, so I ended up comparing it a lot to their later games. Personally, I think Bastion is their weakest game, but saying that really undersells it because it's a great game. I just feel that it has been eclipsed by Transistor and Pyre because those games are amazing and they are built off the solid foundation that Bastion left. So I was wondering, how do you feel Bastion has held up when compared to the later Supergiant titles? This might be a bit off topic, but what is your ranking of the Supergiant games? There are a lot of elements in Bastion that have shown up in other Supergiant games, like the optional difficulty system, the narrator, and some other things. However, there were some interesting things that weren't brought over. What bits of Bastion design would you have liked to see implemented into future Supergiant games, or really any other games in general? So we kind of did talk about that last one, but in the sense of other games, non-Supergiant games. So I just want to knock that one out real quick. What would you like to see Supergiant put into their next games, specifically from Bastion?
I mean, Bastion's their template, right? Like we said, a lot of, not just the shrines, but a lot of things from Bastion carried over into Transistor and into Hades and even into Pyre, even though it's less similar in a lot of ways. But I can't really think of much from Bastion that I think future games would benefit from, or would even aren't already doing, I guess, rather. Like, I guess the 2 weapon thing, like the weapon combination thing, like Hades only has about 5 weapons. Or 4 right now. I think it's gonna have a 5th in a final update, or it might be 5 now and it'll come with a 6th. I'm pretty sure it's that. And you can only have 1 weapon while you're out there. So you can't switch up your setup. You can always only ever fight in one way, but they found different ways to make that sort of build thing happen over time while you're playing through the game, like doing one of your runs as a roguelike. Yeah, I can't really think of much from Bastion that the future games aren't already doing. Is there anything that you can think of other than maybe like a hub? I think that's probably the only thing I'd like to see them bring back.
The hub is
having a hub
area. Is kind of where my mind went to, honestly.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, the other games kind of do. I mean, I struggle to. There's probably some like little things that they didn't bring in.
Mm-hmm.
Like Transistor doesn't have a dodge roll, right?
Yeah, but it makes up for that with the attack system. So like they always find different ways
you can
to
fucking pause time. Yeah,
they always find different ways to emulate those same sorts of feeling systems, but do them in ways that fit the tone and aesthetic. And that's also another thing, is like the more they bring from Bastion, the farther they stray from their ideal to have each game have its own style, aesthetic, tone, atmosphere, all that sort of stuff. So the move away from a dodge roll towards that tack system, I think, feeds into that techno-futurist sort of ideal that they had for Transistor, and the move away from two weapons kind of moves towards that very pious move that they have in Hades, where it's very Greek and very like your weapon is your weapon, and that is how you define your fighting style, and then the gods help you over time and stuff like that. Like, that sort of thing, I think, is where they're going in general. So the more that you bring from Bastion, the less you have of a new game. But yeah, the only element I can think of, maybe an overworld map, but the hub for sure. I'd love to see what based on their writing, not just in Bastion, because a lot of that was really narration, but they're writing in Pyre, and now they're writing in Hades. If they could take that and create a better hub, because Hades does have a hub. Whenever you start a new run, you always start off in this area where there's a bunch of characters to talk to. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. There's stores and ways to upgrade your items and stuff. But I'd love to see what they could do with something like Ashen's sort of world, where you're doing new things and it impacts the hub in a major way. You can see how characters react to what you're doing and the way that they have conversations with you and stuff. And I'd love to see them do more with that in the future, if anything, for sure.
I agree, especially like especially within the framework of like how Ashen handles it. It'd be really, really cool to see what sorts of things they can do with that, because they've only gotten better at writing and solidifying like a game world. It'd be so kick-ass. Mm-hmm. So how do you think Bastion compares to later Supergiant titles?
I mean, it's the worst one, but that's not really saying a whole lot. I mean, that was their first run at making a game, right? Exactly. As a group, and in the way that they made it. So yeah, I mean, it's, it goes for me, Bastion, Pyre, Transistor, or sorry, Bastion, Pyre.
I'm about to fight
Bastion,
you.
Pyre, Hades, Transistor. There we go.
Wow, I'm about to fight you more.
I really like Pyre,
no.
But like...
Wait, sorry.
That's worst to best.
That was worst to best? Okay, all right, there we go then. Same order. I haven't played Hades, though.
Yeah.
But Transistor is... Oh, God, I love Transistor, man.
Yeah, it's really good. It's stupid good. Like, it shouldn't be that good. But also, to be fair, it's like, as well as that that sort of ranking of the games, I mean, like 95% of indie games are like a million times below below Bastion. Like, what Supergiant does is just out of this world. And, my 95% is off the basis that there are like 1,000 indie games coming out every 2 months.
Yeah, that's a fair number.
Yeah.
Like, when you're looking at the bulk of it, yeah, easily Transistor is in my top 5 games of like all time.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Bastion's not even in my top 20.
That's fair.
It's no contest, and I have not played Hades yet, as I said. But you're talking up a pretty good game for Hades. I'm gonna have to check it out.
It was a pretty good game. It was pretty good.
And Pyre's pretty good. Pyre's pretty damn.
I
good.
dig it a lot. I'm a fan.
Pyre made me feel things.
You feel things a lot, to be fair.
I am very prone to this thing called feeling things.
Yeah. It really do be like that.
It really do be like that.
Sometimes.
Most of the time.
95% of the time.
95% of the time, I'm crying all the time. So those are all of our questions that I had from audience peeps, from listeners. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about with Bastion?
I did have
the Bastion.
I did have one question regarding Bastion vis-a-vis B. I hate myself. Bastion. Vis-a-vis Bastion.
Bastion.
Vis-a-ba. The Baba is Bastion.
Oh shit.
Sorry. The fact that Darren Korb was a musician before he became more of a sound designer and a composer for Supergiant, that speaks to, I think, that ability to transfer your external skill into games. Like, you know, some of the best games are made by people who didn't make games before they made games, or who played some games, but like, you know, their perception of games wasn't marred by playing a ton of them all the time. That being said,
the director was and
this is my question.
Too, right?
Cassavin, one of the writers for the game, not really the director so much as he was the writer. He was a critic at GameSpot for a couple of years, for a good while actually. And he left that part of the industry to move over to do game design and production and all that sort of stuff at EA and 2K, and I think eventually Activision, something like that. But like, he worked for a bunch of different studios. And then he started working for Supergiant with some of the people that used to work at EA that had left and that he was friends with, and then he decided to go work with after he departed from his final job, which I think might have been at 2K. And that led to, again, like we said, one of the cornerstones of gaming in the indie space that really set off the whole sort of renaissance. Do you think that his involvement in the critical space helped him create something better, or do you think that it was sort of just a fluke? Like, him being a critic had nothing to do with his ability. And this is obviously, we can only speculate. We can't really say whether or not he would have been better in some alternate universe where he didn't critique games. But do you think, even ignoring this specific example, do you think that critiquing something can create a better creator? Or do you think that, in looking at Korb specifically, do you think that somebody who really doesn't have anything to do with the games industry can have a greater impact on games? Which one do you think makes the most sense?
I think comparing Korb to Cassavin is apples and oranges.
I mean, okay, yeah, my point again, not those specific people, but I'm saying
I get it. Yeah. I think that, one, it depends on what you're getting into it to do. Like what your background is or isn't, and what you're aiming to do within the space. Like, if your background is music and you've never touched a video game and you get brought on to produce a video game soundtrack, you're going to be good because you have experience in music. Your experience with games doesn't matter. But if you've never programmed anything in your life and you get brought on to code, who knows what's going to happen? Sure,
but that, you know,
but
writing is writing.
From being a critic or from being a writer, I feel like a lot of people assume that being a critic is just talking shit about a thing or talking about what you do and don't like. And that's true for a good number of critics, the ones who are just critics, but there is the part of being a critic where it is an actual form of critical analysis of a thing. And I haven't read any of Cassavin's work doing that, but it kind of stands to reason to me that knowing, like, having experience critically analyzing why things do and don't work within an industry, even if that's just your own personal preference, would give you a pretty good leg up when it comes to creating something within that space. Like, that's not necessarily true for, like, writing is writing, as you said. And being able to analyze writing in other games and knowing what you do and don't like for whatever reason will help you better define your flavor when you write a thing. I don't think it was a fluke that Bastion was so deep with its writing. And we see that with the rest of Supergiant's games, you know? Like, the writing is consistently good. Mm-hmm. Whether or not that's because he was a critic, I don't know. But I think that the fact that he did do analysis probably helped a little bit.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I've just been, like, ruminating on that idea because, you know, there's so many YouTubers now, so many people who have built careers independently or otherwise on analyzing games, on sitting down and thinking about them for hours, or making 3 hour, 5 hour long videos about games that they like or didn't like, and breaking down the reasons as to why or why not. And that sort of thing, I think it's easy to say that and then, you know, be presented with your own opportunity to do something and not be able to do it. And I'm not saying that every critic needs to be capable of creating in order to be a good critic, but I am curious, like, you know, what we're going to see in 10 years, 15 years, when these people like say that this industry dries up, say that there's something happens, there's some shift in viewer interest. They don't want to hear these hour-long videos anymore. They don't want to see videos of people breaking down games anymore. What happens to those people? Do they move on and make games? Like, is that something that, if they're capable of doing, are those years of critiquing things, is that going to help them in the future? And that's something I've been thinking about. Like, you know, are these critiques, these amateur critiques, or these, you know, professional critiques, or critics rather? Why am I saying critiques? These amateur critics or professional critics, are they going to be able to move forward and achieve the thing that I think what a lot of them want to do is make their own stuff. So, you know, I'm interested to see what that's like in the future.
It's going to be interesting to see for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be very, very interesting to see. I call me a cynic, but I don't think that anywhere near like half of the YouTubers who spend their time talking and analyzing games will move on to actual game development. It's a thing. Speaking as one who tried, it's a thing.
It's tough.
So I think that's it.
I think so.
All right, let's move on to that outro.
We're gonna rock down to Outro Avenue. And then we'll take you higher.
We don't have the rights to that song. You have to stop now.
It's fine. There's no music playing in the background for that. It's all good.
So, thank you for joining us for this month's episode of Byte Club. June's game, voted for by our patrons, is Firewatch. Now, Firewatch is a single-player, first-person mystery set in the Wyoming wilderness, where your only emotional lifeline is the person on the other end of a handheld radio. It's a game full of gorgeous vistas, a beautiful soundtrack, and a gripping narrative that is both suspenseful and thought-provoking. If you want to pick it up and join in on the conversation for the next Byte Club, you can find it on PS4, Xbox One, and the eShop for Nintendo Switch, Steam, and GOG for $20. I have not played this game. As always, I'm stoked. You've played this, right, Jesse?
I've played it a good handful of times. I think Firewatch is fantastic. That's my review of it already. Don't listen to the next one. I'm just kidding. Listen to the next one. I'm a huge fan. I like it a lot, so I am excited to hear what you think about it, because I feel like we will feel the same about the game. But you have the benefit of not having played it when it came out, which I did. So I'm curious to hear what you thought about it.
Me too. If you'd like to vote for July's game, then head on over to patreon.com/indiebytesyt to learn more about how you can. The choices up for voting for July's games are Hyper Light Drifter, Outer Wilds, and Luca Born of a Dream. 3 very rad games that I'm going to be excited no matter which one of those gets picked.
Oh, yeah.
As always, we'll be taking your questions about next month's game and chatting about them here on the podcast, so send them in as you come up with them. We have 3 ways for you to send in questions. You can email them to nevin@indie-bytes.com. You can use the contact form on the Indie Bytes website, or you can just yell at me on Twitter. You can find Jesse on Twitter @Goratia. You can find a whole bunch of indie game related content on Twitter @IndieBytesWT, on YouTube as IndieBytes, and at IndieBytes.com. This episode's music is from the Bastian soundtrack by Darren Korb, and it can be found pretty much everywhere, and you had better go listen to it because fuck, it's good.
Oh, yeah.
And that's it. Thanks for listening. We're looking forward to getting your questions, and we will see you next month.
Yeah, hopefully. We'll see you next month. You better be around. Better stick around.
Better stick around. Stay. Watch this space.
Oh, yeah. Subscribe for more. Click the bell.
Bye.